In the right state of mind, the apparently impossible becomes possible. I read in a book about a doctor who had a patient who had a fatal illness. He was dying, and a newspaper had a headline that a new drug had been found just for this illness, and it had very good results. So his doctor put him on it, and within a couple of weeks he'd recovered. He was back to normal. He was doing all the normal things that he did in life, and everything was going fine, until about 6 months later, when a newspaper carried a headline saying that this drug was useless, didn't do anything at all. Within a week he was back in hospital. Within a further 2 weeks he was dead. So what happened there? I also read about a research study where various elderly people were taken away by the researchers and put into a remote location, and they were given the sort of clothes that they wore in their teens, and they set up a radio station that played music and news reports from the same sort of time. And there were magazines and newspapers around, again from the time when they were in their teens. After a couple of weeks, the researchers started to notice that the typical old age ailments that these people had, like rheumatism and arthritis, were going into remission. And this continued while the research was going on. And then when these people went back to their normal everyday lives in the present day, the illnesses came back. So what was going on there? I also read about another research project where the researchers selected 2 different groups of people who were ill in various hospitals. On the basis, the 2 groups were as near as possible identical. One was a control group and the other was the experimental group. Now, it's important just to say that none of the patients in either of these groups knew that they were part of a research project. What the researchers did, and this took place in America, so they're way ahead of us in research, they took the one list to a Bible group in the Bible Belt and simply said, these people are ill in hospital, please will you pray for them? So the people in the Bible group prayed for the people on the list, and those people started to at least get a bit better. I don't know if any actually recovered, but they actually started to get better. So what was going on there? You've probably heard of people who walked barefoot on a firebed completely unscathed. Perhaps you've done it. A lot of people have heard about this, but a lot of people have never actually met anyone who's done that. But at least through the camera you have now, because I've done that. I've also walked barefoot across a bed of broken glass, completely unscathed. I've also bent steel reinforcing bars. I did this with the help of a colleague and 2 pieces of tissue, which usually intrigues people. The tissue was wrapped around each end of the bar so that if there were any sharp points on it where the bar had been cut, they wouldn't actually scratch or cut us. We then stood the bar's length apart and inserted the end of the bar here. Put our arms out straight each side of us, so it was obvious we weren't touching the bar, and then we bent the bar double by pressing toward each other with our throats. How did we do that? By absolute belief, by absolutely knowing that everything was going to be okay and everything would work and we would be fine. What really astounded me when I did this glass walk was that there were a couple of elderly women in their 70s, and where most of us walked across fairly carefully, these 2 just marched across at great speed. And I said to one of them afterwards, how did you do that? And she said to me, I just knew I wouldn't get hurt. In the right state of mind, the apparently impossible becomes possible. But it's more than positive thinking. Positive thinking doesn't work. As Tony Robbins, the NLP expert, said, positive thinking doesn't work. So try closing the curtains at the back of your house and leaving your garden for 6 months and thinking positively, there are no weeds in my garden. When you open the curtains, it'll be a jungle. That sort of thinking just doesn't work. You've probably heard of people who say, it doesn't matter what I eat, I never put on an ounce, and they don't. But everybody knows that if you eat the wrong sort of food and huge amounts of it, you'll get fat, but these people don't. They know that they won't. Deep down they know that they won't, even though evidence points to the contrary. If you believe really strongly to the point of what I call emotional certainty, and it takes practice and it takes time, because you've got a lot of old-fashioned negative thinking to overcome, but once you get to that point, the apparently impossible really does become possible.